Hi Alison, how are you?
Hi, Oriana. I'm good. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. So let's just get straight into it. Thank you for joining us today on this session about adapting to change and leading with resilience. So the first question we have for you is, what has been the biggest challenge for BT since the pandemic hit in March, and how has that impacted revenue?
Okay. Well, we've got about 80,000 people in the UK bit of the business, and about 50% of them have continued to go to work in different forms outside of the home during the pandemic. So we've got, quite a large number of field engineers who've needed to be out and about helping to keep service up for customers. We've also got people working in our 999 centres and our network operations, and some continuing to go into contact centres. So around about 40,000 people have continued to go into the workplace, and the other 50% have managed to work remotely. So I guess that the twin sort of primary challenges have really been, first of all, to our colleagues to make sure that we can keep them safe and well through all of that. But also we're very aware of how central what we do and what we provide is to our customers. So keeping our customers connected as well. So we've really been focusing primarily on those two things. I think that our business hasn't been entirely unaffected by COVID. Operationally, we've turned in a really strong performance, actually, and I think that that's fairly widely recognised, that the network has held up well in this time, and that's with an enormous amount of effort behind the scenes. But financially, some of our revenues are down in the areas like sports revenues, for obvious reasons, actually, because sport was on hold for quite a time. Small and medium businesses in particular, their confidence has been dented, and we've seen some impact there too. And more broadly at different times across the customer base. But on the upside, what we do and what we sell is, has never been more central to people's lives. So we do see people, continuing to want to upgrade on kind of speed and connectivity. And the iPhone launched recently was a great success for us. So we're relatively resilient during the crisis. We've seen some impact on our revenues, but we've come through it reasonably well so far.
That sounds good. One thing BT have announced is that it will shut 4,600 exchanges and offices in more than 270 locations. And I know you briefly mentioned remote working. So is there a plan to adopt like a full remote working model, or maybe something hybrid?
Certainly something hybrid. So the short answer to the question, are we going to follow the lead of, some other organizations, in particular some of the tech companies, and come out and say that we believe that this is a way of working for all our business over the longer term? No, we don't believe that, actually. We still believe that it's going to be really important for our business to have sort of great spaces in which people can come together, collaborate, innovate, be creative. I think that's the bit of our business, but many other businesses, that people are really beginning to see sort of drift away at the moment. It's extremely difficult to do that through this medium, but we do expect to retain many of the elements of what you call hybrid working, actually, that we've all been sort of forced to accelerate on during this time. So I would expect that actually, on average, people will want to come into the workplaces less frequently, perhaps 3 days a week, something like that on average, and 2 days a week working flexibly in another way. And we're planning for that, actually. So in some ways, although it's been difficult to adapt so quickly to this way of working, necessity is the mother of invention, and I do see it as one of the slightly strange unintended consequences, but benefits of the pandemic, that it's forced us actually to experiment with different ways of working, more flexible ways of working, and I think we'll preserve many of those as we start to come back into the workplaces.
I couldn't agree more. I think obviously flexible working is probably one of the silver linings of technology. But closing and even downsizing an office of such a large scale for firms like BT is obviously much more complicated than for an SME. What have been the challenges so far?
Well, we're at a relatively early stage, actually. We have started this program, which will see us going from, 300, roughly 300 locations across the UK to 30 strategic hubs. This is a program that's going to roll out over 3 to 4 years, actually. So we're in the very early stages of that at the moment. And we're going to take it slow and steady. It's an enormous undertaking to really kind of move from such a dispersed way of operating to something which is much more concentrated like that. I mean, clearly the benefits that come with that in terms of collaboration, innovation, the ability to bring people together and incubate and innovate at speed, they're self-evident to everyone. But we need to make sure that we do that in a way that protects business continuity and also protects the fact that across those 300 locations, we've got many critical skills that we want to preserve in the business. So we're taking it very, very steadily, actually. I mean, I think we've had some logistical challenges brought on by the pandemic. So some of the buildings that we were hoping to open, actually Birmingham, frustratingly, we're good to go on Birmingham. It's beautiful and it's the most incredible workspace actually for people. But we haven't been able to open the doors in Birmingham because it was ready in December. But of course, we've all been in lockdown since then. So we've had some delays to the opening of some of the new buildings, and obviously for periods of time, particularly in the first lockdown, construction was limited or restricted in some way, and that's had some impacts too. But we're still on course to open our London headquarters, for example, which will be completely new and purpose built for us. We're still on course to open that later on this year. So that's really exciting. I think it's not so much the logistical challenges. It's actually a sort of cultural and people challenge, and that's like any change program. We are trying very hard to be clear, to be transparent, to give our people as much notice as possible of, where their site and their building is going to be affected and what that will mean for them. We can't do that in a big bang all at once because we're still working through the plans. But as soon as we're clear about what it means for people in different areas, we're trying to go out and engage with them on that. Obviously, we're working very closely with our trade unions on it. And we're also doing a lot of work with our people networks. So we have 10 people networks who represent constituencies, communities within our workforce. For example, religious communities or LGBTQ+, or our ethnic diversity, disability, and so on, and carers networks. We work very closely with them to make sure that, what we are creating and setting up and the way in which we're going about really implementing this program takes as much notice and care as we possibly can for colleagues with very many different life circumstances, so that we try to do this in a way that brings as many people with us as we possibly can. That is probably our biggest challenge, actually.
Funny, because that actually comes on to what I was going to ask you, which is, how can employers support workers through long-term changes like shutting or moving an office? So as well as, I guess, one of your is moving at a steady pace and making people aware of the changes. Is there anything else?
Well, I always think that that it's important to give people as much choice and as much power, if I can put it that way, in a situation like this as you possibly can. Now, that requires certainly a big business like ours to be planful quite some time ahead, because for people working in our business, there are two sort of challenges coming at them. One is, of course, the fact that we're moving from 300 very spread locations to 30. So there's a location threat or challenge associated with that. The other actually is that because of the nature of our business, it's a technology business, we are changing quite rapidly. And with with more automation and more simplification of our business, which we have to do to become more competitive, that brings with it consequences, because some work that's being done at the moment, of course, won't exist in the future, and we'll need new and different skills from the future. So we're working very hard to try to get ahead of that as much as possible, so that we can give our people who might be affected by some of those changes as much opportunity as possible to reskill, to retrain, to understand that although the work that they're currently doing might be declining over the next few years, they see where the growth is going to be in our business, and we give them as much opportunity as we can to and with the tools, the learning tools that we have, to reskill themselves, so that if they want to stay with the company, we're giving them the best chance possible of doing that. But of course, you can't do that with very short timelines. You have to really give people as much notice as you can, so that they have the time to make up their minds about whether or not they want to take up these opportunities, and in order to stay with the company.
When it does appear, impossible to forecast ahead, how do how do leaders set objectives for what is an unknown future?
I think you're right. We've all challenged ourselves on that, but I think we've got learning, actually, of course, like all of these adverse experiences that any of us have in life. You get most learning, ironically, out of the really tough periods of your life and career. I think that as it happens, just as the pandemic broke, we had finished a piece of work to reset our strategy, our ambition, our purpose, our values, and that has proved to be beautifully timely, as it were, because I think that you do need, in times like this, you do need some very clear North Stars that set the destination, as it were, or the next stop in what is, for companies like ours, many decades of different journeys. But you need a set of North Stars that actually say to people, this is where we're going. This is how we want to be. This is the culture that we want to develop in our business and evolve. And this is our purpose. We connect for good. And I think if you have those very clear North Stars, then actually the long-term destination doesn't change. Actually, what changes is how quickly perhaps you can get there. And inevitably, actually, periods like this probably will reshape a little bit customer expectations. So customers, both business customers, but also consumers, will come out of this experience themselves, perhaps with some slightly adjusted needs and ambitions for what they want from companies like ours. So it's extremely important to keep close to your customers during a period like this, so that you understand if there are course corrections that you need to make to the plan to go to a particular place. I think the hardest bit is forecasting the short term. So forecasting for the next 12 months, for example, financially, or for the next 24, that is much trickier, because it's genuinely difficult to understand, what this might do to customer behavior. And obviously there's a big element of psychology in this. I mean, customers, many customers still have the same amount of money coming in as they had. Some don't, of course, but it breeds conservatism. Of course it does, because people are not sure actually about whether or not their job is totally secure. And therefore you do get periods of time, particularly during the lockdowns, where customers are clearly thinking very hard about any spending that they're doing. And it's really hard to know, what will happen as things begin to ease and the restrictions come off. So we forecast reasonably well, actually, for this period of time. We put together an adjusted plan just as we went into lockdown, and we're tracking pretty well against that, actually, this year. But I do think, and I do think that the medium term, plan for how we get from where we are now to this long-term destination that we'd already set out, I'm sure we'll need to make some adjustments here and there to that. But I actually think the real challenge is forecasting during and then in the recovery phase, which hopefully won't take too long. I think it's much easier to sort of stay focused on the longer term. That doesn't change.
Speaking of job securities, the elephant in the room, there have been some aggressive job cuts at BT in the last couple of years. That must have had an impact on culture. So where do you go from there to build a stronger, a better culture and business?
Well, I'm going to challenge your use of the word aggressive, actually, and just put that in context. So we announced in 2018 that we would be reducing the size of the business by 13,000 roles over a 3-year period, which we're on track to deliver. Just going back to the conversation we were having just now, we run at about 10% attrition each year, so around about 10,000 people leave our business each year. Of course, in delivering that 13,000, we've quite deliberately reshaped the business so that we reduced the 13,000 in the areas where we felt that was most appropriate. So most of that has been in management and back office roles. We've actually, in that period of time, continued to hire in and invest in frontline roles. So really, that was a statement of intent, which was about reshaping the business to reduce as much as possible in management and back office, and to make sure that we could continue to invest in the front lines. We've been very clear that we do need to increase the competitiveness of the company, and we need to simplify the company and modernize the company, and quite a lot of that is to do with technology. And as we bring in more automation and simplify the company, then that will mean that quite a lot of roles over the next 5 years, which are involved in transactional work to do with that complexity, will go. But again, we're looking at a gradual, steady reshaping, carefully controlled, of the company over 5 years, rather than any big sudden redundancy programs.
And how do you think, even if it is mainly churn, how do you think you're going to carry on building on your culture, especially with the office moving? It's all a lot of change.
I think that we do need to be quite conscious about that, actually. So there are areas where it's quite possible to, many areas actually, where it's quite possible to take people from one part of the business and reskill them and have them work, in another part of the business. But that's not universally true, and you wouldn't expect it to be in a technology company like ours. I mean, we are headed towards a very different kind of future as a technology company, and it's inevitable that we need a critical mass of new and different skills. And the Better Workplace program, which is our consolidation to 30 strategic sites, will allow us the oxygen, if I can put it that way, to bring in new and different skills. Actually, not all of those will be from within the UK. Some of the really leading edge technology skills that we need for the future are found at the moment outside of the UK. So there'll be some of that in the company as well, actually. But all forms of diversity are healthy for a company like ours.
Does that mean you'll be offshoring?
No, it doesn't mean that. Sorry, no. It means that for skill sets like AI, for example, there are pools. There aren't enormous pools of talent in the UK yet. So it may mean that here and there we bring people in from other countries who have specific skill sets in some of those very new technology areas. But that you would expect that of us, yeah. But of course, mostly we're a British company, and the vast majority of our people will be British, and we want to stimulate the sort of production of those kinds of pools of leading edge technology talent as much as we can in the UK.
So a lot of leaders will have to make job cuts as a result of the pandemic. Do you have any tips or advice on delivering bad news?
Well, only what any sort of sensible, thoughtful human being would say, I think, which is, I always think that the tip really is to think about what you would want, how you would want to be spoken to, communicated with, handled, supported through an experience like that. This is never something that actually feels great to people. And I think you have to acknowledge that people do feel anxious and emotional and angry sometimes. And you need to be respectful of the way that people are likely to feel through that process. You need to be honest with them. So, don't fudge the message. If actually there is going to be an impact on a site or a group of people, you need to be really clear and honest and transparent and consistent with the way that you talk to those people, but handle them with respect and care and thoughtfulness through the process. You may not change the outcome, but you can change actually how that experience feels to people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, working in HR during the pandemic, there must have been challenges to yourself. You know, you must have been at the brunt of people's anger, concerns, especially during so much uncertainty. How do you protect your own mental health? You know, not let people bring you down, and build resilience, I guess.
Yeah, I do the same kinds of things that many other people have learned how to do, actually. So I try to get outside a couple of times a day. I walk my dog a couple of times a day, first thing in the morning and sort of late at night. I try to eat well. I try to get the right kind of sleep. I try not to spend too much time on the news, actually, and limit my screen time a bit. I'm quite a big fiction reader, so I like to lose myself in someone else's story, if I can put it that way. But focusing on what feels good and what I can control, and what's pleasurable, even in this very restricted way, and not spending too much time thinking about the things that I can't do that I would love to do. Nothing particularly outstanding about that, but it is the small everyday things that I think make the difference.
And I mean, we can't advise all employees get a dog and go for walks with their dog. So what about your workforce? How can you build a resilient and adaptable workforce with a clear focus?
I think this comes down to many of the things that we've been talking about, actually. You need to give people clarity, first of all. You need people to understand where the company's going and to be able to relate that to what that might mean for them, both now and in the future. If people can understand what the mission is and what part they can play in that, that's for sure first base, as it were. And then I think you need to put as much choice into people's hands as possible. So this goes to some of the stuff about having access to learning that allows people to steer their own careers, to make their own choices about where they want to go. I mean, it's true always that, sometimes what people want from a company is not what the company can actually deliver or should deliver, because we're a company, we're moving fast in a very competitive sector. So, we can't always meet the needs and aspirations of the people who work for us. But we do want, as much as possible, people to feel that they have choices, to feel that they have options. And I think that creates resilience and adaptability, actually. It's much easier to feel resilient if you feel that you have choice and power in the decision, rather than to feel as if somehow you're a helpless victim of the company and whatever it is that it wants to do. So I think as much as possible, it's about giving your people the clarity and the understanding and the wherewithal and the tools and the practical support to make as much as they can of the career and the opportunities that the company offers them. And if in the end that doesn't match, that they feel that they've the time that they've spent with the company gives them a springboard to go off and do something else, which fits them and suits them and fulfills them. So that's the hallmark of a great company. I think it can't always be everything that every individual working in it might want it to be, but it should be a place where people feel that they've got a great career experience and where they've had as much choice as possible.
And finally, can you just reveal maybe one little thing that BT may be implementing in 2021 for success?
Oh gosh, it'd be very I'm going to give you three things, but really quickly. So the three things we're really focused on this year, one is continuing to roll out the networks that really make a difference to customers. So the 5G network, we're going gangbusters on that and extending that. We're obviously really ramping up now the fibre build across the UK. That's such a critical part of the UK's infrastructure for consumers, but also for businesses. And we are increasing the pace and speed on that as we go. The second area is really standing up this new unit that we've talked about, the new digital unit. That's not about an organizational change. It's about a fundamental way of driving innovation and incubation and accelerating us to the point where we become this different technology business in the future. There's a lot of work going on to make sure that we get off the blocks very quickly with that. And the third thing, I suppose, is eventually, hopefully, we are going to open these beautiful new buildings in 2021. So Birmingham's ready and waiting. London is coming later this year, towards the back end of the year, our new headquarters in London, and we're opening up a new site in Manchester too. And it would be brilliant to get into some of those buildings.
Wow. Well, I look forward to seeing the new office.
Yes, you must come and see them. They are absolutely beautiful.
Well, thanks for talking to me, Alison. I think that is all we have time for.
Okay, that was great. Thank you, Oriana.